Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Season 4, Episode 46 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail through Week 13 and the rest of the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. This is our Thanksgiving special for 2024, a little bit of a different show. So today we'll be talking about all three Thanksgiving games in some way, shape, or form. And we'll also be talking about the Black Friday game taking place on Friday. So a lot to talk about there. We're not going to talk about Sunday's games, but if you do need information about Sunday's games, join our live show this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We're dropping this show on Wednesday. So, Nick, how are you feeling heading into Thanksgiving football-wise?
Well, we know it's a couple weeks till 2 weeks left of the regular season for your fantasy team. So Nick and I will be here to hopefully help push you over the edge of the playoffs. And this is one of the big weeks of football, one of the big weeks of the year. Kind of kicks off, obviously, in the calendar, it kicks off all the fun holidays and all the fun that we get to have, but obviously starts to kick off the fantasy football playoffs and into your actual playoffs. It's a good time of year. It's a good time of year. And for some of us that haven't had the best seasons on the actual football field, not in the fantasy football field, some of us are kind of looking forward to that. So some good things all around.
Big Jets Seahawks game this weekend. Big
game
Seahawks.
This weekend. We shall see what happens.
Like I said, if this is your first time watching us, this is the Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. You get two shows from us during the week. Normally they're on Tuesdays and then a Thursday/Friday show, but because of Thanksgiving and 4 games taking place earlier in the week, we kind of shifted things to give you guys something a little bit different. Normally on our later show, we'll give you our all boom and all bust teams. We're not doing that this week. We're doing something a little bit different, again, focused on the Thanksgiving and Black Friday game. But if you do need your questions answered, if you do need to talk about Sunday's games, join our live show this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, available on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We do that live show every single Sunday of the fantasy football season. So nothing different, same business as usual. Join us Sunday anywhere that you like to consume our content. We're also available on all audio streaming platforms. And if you do have any questions during the week, iTunes, Spotify, any questions during the week, I'm all over the place with my plugs. Twitter and Instagram. Twitter is Primetime FF Pod. Instagram is Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. So we're just calling this segment Thanksgiving Special. And again, if you're a weekly viewer/listener, normally this is where we get into our all boom and all bust teams. Not doing that. So here's what we are getting into. We are doing a whole Thanksgiving feast and 2 Black Friday deals, I should say. So we have a description for each one. So we have turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, stuffing, green bean casserole. And then for Black Friday, we have the doorbuster deal and the impulse buy. So we're going to give you a description, and then we'll tell you which player we have for each category. We have different players for each one of these categories. So a total of 5 players each for Thanksgiving. So a total of 10 players to talk about. And then Black Friday, we each have 2 players to talk about. So let us start with Thanksgiving. And the first one here is the turkey. It's going to be the main course. And this is the description. The player expected to dominate and deliver a massive performance on Thanksgiving. They're the reliable star you've been counting on all season, and Thanksgiving is their time to shine. Everything revolves around them. So, Nick, who is your turkey for Thanksgiving?
I am going with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has been an absolute superstar this year. He has been probably the main course of your fantasy team. Drafted in the first round, but one of the few receivers up in that range that has absolutely crushed it and been a hit. He has 8 straight games with a touchdown, which did end last week, unfortunately. But I think he's going to go right ahead and get it back in this Bears matchup. The Bears game, typically a tough one for wide receivers, but Amon-Ra in his career is averaging 8 targets, 6 catches, 60 yards. He gets in the end zone. That is close to a 20-point day. I think he breaks that number. I think he has the best game a Lions wide receiver a wide receiver has had against the Bears in this matchup. I think he revives that touchdown streak, and I think he has a massive game for your fantasy team.
I'm going to go with the other superstar on the Lions, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a running back 4 in the season. You probably drafted him as a running back 6 or 8, probably in round 2, and he's overproduced at this point. Every game this season, he's at over double-digit fantasy points, and in 7 out of 11 games, he's produced 17-plus fantasy points. He's facing the Bears, who are tough on quarterbacks and wide receivers, but they are not tough on running backs. They don't give up a ton of points to running backs. They're kind of middle of the pack, but over the last 2 weeks, they gave up 20-plus points to Josh Jacobs, and then they gave 20-plus points to Aaron Jones last week. This is also an over-under of 48.5. I didn't look at all the over-unders of the week, but typically anything over 47 ends up being a top 3 over-under of the week. So that is a high over-under. We are expecting a lot of points for the first game on Thanksgiving. So if you have both Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown, you should start off Thanksgiving, with your main course, and you should be pretty happy with that main course. So next up here, we have the ham. The ham is the sleeper. Some people quietly prefer ham to turkey, and when it's done right, it can absolutely be elite. This represents the sleeper player who doesn't get as much attention, but has the potential to outshine everyone else on Thanksgiving. Who is your sleeper, or your ham, I should say?
I'm going with Devon Achane, a guy I've been all over this year. The one sole Dolphin who has really exceeded his ADP near the top of the draft boards. He has been a stud, and he has done a lot of his damage with Tua, but he was just as good. Not as good, but he was still pretty good.
I don't think his numbers were very good without Tua. That's a point that we had.
That's true. They weren't great without Tua, but they were still good enough to put him to their RB6 on the season. Here has been his 7 games that he has played with Tua this year: 23, 30, 28, 32, a low of 10, 21, and 21. In those 7 games, he finished as a top 3 running back 4 times, the top 6 running back 6 times. He has been crushing it. The target share has been crazy. So far, over the course of the season, he has 48 catches, which is absolutely absurd for a running back. But 40 of those were with Tua. If he played with Tua for the entire season, and we assume he kept up that same pace, he would have paced out 97 catches over the course of the year, which would have been the 8th highest all-time at the running back position, only behind McCaffrey twice, Matt Forte, Eckler, and a couple of older guys. With running backs like Saquon, Derrick Henry, and Gibbs really getting all the attention, I don't think Achane's gotten his flowers this year. I don't think he gets enough credit for everything that he's done, and that makes him the perfect ham candidate, a guy that is being slept on, who is having a great season, that just really doesn't get pointed out enough on all these fantasy shows.
My ham candidate is somebody that I just think in Thanksgiving in general for the game is being slept on, and that's going to be Keenan Allen. I was between Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, and I did sway to the Keenan Allen way. In 4 games in November, he has 22 receptions, so averaging about 5 and a change of receptions a game on 39 targets. So he's averaging close to 10 targets a game in November. 207 yards. That average isn't great. It's only about 50 yards and 1 touchdown. So overall, he doesn't have a great November in terms of production, but you could see the opportunity is there, especially since Shane Waldron got canned. Caleb Williams is developing right in front of our eyes. He's becoming more comfortable. He's hitting his throws. The one throw he had the other day on the run looked like a college player, at USC. Yeah. So with that said, I think this really sets up nicely for Keenan Allen. The Lions give up the 9th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think both Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are in play. And the over-under is very high, like I already stated, 48.5. So I think the fact that the Bears will be playing from behind, like the Lions will probably jump out early and they'll, have an offensive explosion. And then, the Bears will kind of get there. So I think both Keenan Allen and DJ Moore could have been the ham candidates, but I went with Keenan Allen because he has more targets than DJ Moore in November and even over the last 2 weeks. So I like the opportunity that he's being presented. Does have chemistry with Caleb Williams, and I think we'll see that on Thursday. Next up, we have the mashed potatoes, and here is the description for your mashed potatoes. It's the workhorse. A dependable, volume-based player who racks up consistent points. Just like mashed potatoes are a staple of the meal, this player keeps your fantasy football lineup steady and grounded no matter what. So, Nick, who is your steady workhorse player for Thanksgiving?
When I think of workhorse, there's only been a few running backs you think of this year, and I was fortunate enough that one of them was playing on Thanksgiving. You think of your Derrick Henry, you think of your Saquon Barkley, you think of Kyron Williams, and to me, you think about Josh Jacobs, who has the 4th most carries in the NFL this year. If he gets over 60 yards, or I believe 55 yards, 56 yards, he will have a 1,000-yard season through 13 weeks, which is fantastic. The touchdowns, have really caught up to him on this back half or the second third of the season. From week 1 through 6, only 1 touchdown with incredibly high usage and efficiency. He only finished in the top 10 once in that span, and it was the RB10 with 16 points, which was a very low fantasy week. Since week 7, however, 7 touchdowns in 5 games. Those finishes were 20 points, 26, 13, 23, and 29. 3 of those games were in the top 5 span, and now he gets to go up against the Miami Dolphins defense, a team that is middle of pack against the running back position, but we know with that workload and with that recent touchdown upside and volume, he has the upside to be that workhorse that absolutely delivers for you on Thanksgiving.
My workhorse is going to be CeeDee Lamb, and for many of the reasons that Nick stated on our Monday show. He's been very, very consistent. He's a wide receiver 3 on the season. He has 7 out of 11 games at 15-plus fantasy points. Now, he hasn't exploded for like 30-plus, but he's been consistently getting you enough points in your lineup to justify right around the ADP where he was drafted, maybe a little bit later. Going up against the Giants, who have not been good against wide receivers. And they're not like bottom 10 or anything like that, but they're just not good. I think the Cowboys will probably beat the Giants on Thursday. Jerry will be thrilled about it. And CeeDee should give you a good stat line. So Mr. Consistent continues to be Mr. Consistent for your fantasy team. Next up, we have the stuffing, the big risk, the big reward player. I don't think stuffing's polarizing. And listen, I'm a picky eater.
I think it is very polarizing.
I shouldn't give food takes at all because people that know me personally knows that I am not a food guy, but stuffing is like my favorite Thanksgiving dish.
Wow, that's a crazy take.
Oh, what did you? So
that's exactly what polarizing.
Time out. You know me. What did you think I would like on Thanksgiving?
I was actually thinking about this as we built out the show.
I hate Thanksgiving food.
What food would Nick eat on Thanksgiving? And I literally thought, I don't think there's a single thing. So I stuffing. But
Thanksgiving. It's stuffing, corn. My mom used to make green beans and carrots, mashed potatoes, and biscuits. That is my Thanksgiving.
No turkey, no ham. Mashed potatoes? No?
Mashed potatoes, yes.
Okay. Yes, stuffing is definitely polarizing. There's like a niche community that just absolutely loves stuffing, and then there's the community that's just like, that's ridiculous. I hate stuffing.
I'm cool with it the one day a year I have it. Then I don't want it again. It's fine.
All right.
Anyway,
polarizing.
Stuffing. The big risk, big reward. Stuffing is polarizing. Some people love it. Others can't stand it. I guess you see where me and Nick stand with, but I don't love it. It's fine. This is the high risk, high reward player who could explode for a huge performance or leave you regretting that you put them in the lineup. It's a feast or famine situation with no middle ground. Who is your high risk, high reward player? This is a good option for daily fantasy if you guys that like daily fantasy.
For sure. I am going with a team that absolutely exploded for fantasy last week, but struggled throughout the entire year. It is another very polarizing team. It's the Dallas Cowboys, but I am going with their entire defense and that unit. They're coming off their best game since week 1, the 2 special teams touchdowns. Last week, they had 4 total sacks, 3 forced turnovers against the Commanders. That was a great game. It would have been even better if they didn't let up that 86-yard touchdown to McLaurin, which we know can happen at any point in the game because it's the Dallas Cowboys, and that's what makes them a big risk for a big reward. Now they get to go up against Tommy Cutlets, who I know we're from New York and we're supposed to love him. I'm a Paisan too. I am not a big fan of Mr. Tommy Cutlets' football performance, and I think that he's going to struggle. I think you get a big game from a defense that has struggled for most of the year, but I think they capitalize in what is the lowest over-under game of the week, a game that probably would have had a lot more hype before the year, but now due to injuries and Cowboys stinking, this is kind of where we're at. I think it's time to risk it for Thanksgiving biscuit.
Could use biscuits here. I love my biscuits. All right. I'm going with a guy that I've kind of been down on, but I have to give him his flowers now. That's going to be Mr. Jonnu Smith. Facing the Packers on the night game of Thanksgiving Thursday. Packers will have the 10th most fantasy points, 2 tight ends, an average of 10.7 per game. He's your tight end 5 on the season at the moment, which is crazy. He has 6+ targets in 5 of his last 6 games, and he has 20+ fantasy points in each of his last 2 games. The over-under is set at 46.5. I think the Dolphins will end up playing from behind in frigid conditions. I think if you're looking for a tight end to start this week, I think Jonnu Smith is very, very playable. And lastly, we have the green bean casserole. The disaster in waiting. Green bean casserole, and I know that Nick does not like green bean casserole.
Disgusting.
I just know that. Nick doesn't sound like a casserole guy to me, and I'm not a casserole guy either. Because I don't like things mixed together. I like here. I don't need a mix.
I feel you. I agree on that one. I agree on that.
All right. Green bean casserole has the highest chance of ruining the meal. It's inconsistent, divisive, and when it's bad, it's really bad. This is the player who looks tempting on paper, but is almost guaranteed to disappoint with a dud of a performance on Thanksgiving. Trusting it is a gamble that you might regret. So who is your casserole?
Mine is DeAndre Swift, the guy that I think's been a green bean casserole all season long. But
I think this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest casserole. Now, I chose a different player for the sake of the segment, but this is the one I would have liked to double up on because yes, this is the one.
For sure. And if you need to rely on DeAndre Swift, good luck because you're going to freaking need it. Going up against the Lions defense, one of the elite against the running back position. If you guys tuned into last week's episode, we had a very funny moment where in the all boom segment, Nick was talking about that Lions game and he said, why didn't I bust the running back from the game? And then I winded up actually having Jonathan Taylor on the bust list. Jonathan Taylor, who put up a whopping 3.5
yes, because I bust the Lions running back every single week. I think
they're bad.
Even when you get priority on the bus team, I seem to always get the Lions running back, except for last week. I didn't.
Yeah, he just fell through the cracks. It happens. And there's some other concerns. Ever since Shane Waldron's been fired, all the goal line work has gone to Roschon. It was kind of balancing out for the few weeks beforehand, but it has been Roschon's game. Swift has been very inefficient last week, 2.3 yards per carry, 30 total yards. I think he's a horrible option this week. I think he's a terrible option for your fantasy team. And I know people are going to be tempted to put him on their plate because it is a DeAndre Swift revenge game against the Detroit Lions. I don't think that matters this week. I think he gets absolutely pummeled in this matchup. And last time I put Swift on the bus team, he did go for 5 weeks and be one of the best running backs for fantasy football. So we'll see if he does that. But I am definitely making it my green bean casserole for the week.
I'm going to have Jared Goff, and here's why. Facing the Bears, who allow the third fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, only an average of 13.2. The Bears also allow the sixth fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, an average of 22.8. Last week, Justin Jefferson got shut down, only scored 4.7 fantasy points. Although the Lions have been very, very explosive, Jared Goff is only your quarterback 12 on the season. He's only scored over 20 fantasy points 3 times this season. He's been consistent enough where he's getting anywhere between 10 to 16, 18. I think it's a tough defense. I think the fact that they're going to run the ball a lot like they always do. It's also a David Montgomery revenge game. So I think this will be the Lions run show. And you know, Goff has played well enough this season, but he doesn't need to light it up when they're running the ball out. When they get in the red zone, they do love to use both of their running backs. So that's why I think Goff could be your casserole. We're now going to go to Black Friday, and we have 2 Black Friday or 4 players. There's 2 each that we will talk about here. So for Black Friday, we have the Doorbuster. Let me pull up the text here. The Doorbuster deal is the high-risk, high-reward player. You have to wake up early, fight the crowds, and hope for the best. This is what you used to do on Black Friday before the deal started on November 1st.
Yeah.
This is the player who could either explode with a massive performance or completely bust, leaving you regretting the gamble. Who is your Doorbuster deal?
I am going with Mr. Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in football, not the best quarterback in fantasy football, who had an up and down season, we'll say, for fantasy, and definitely started down, but he has been sneaky good these last 5 weeks, his last 5 games, 19, 25, 17, 18, and 29. He's actually worked his way back up to the QB8 on the season. Over those last 5 games, he does have 12 touchdowns, a number that was definitely holding him back from that MVP conversation. Now they get to host Vegas, and last time he faced Vegas was 5 games ago. His first that kicked off this span with 19 points. Now he gets them at home. The Raiders definitely a worse team since then with all the changes at quarterback. The injuries have piled up. I love this opportunity for Patrick Mahomes, who has been a fringe starter. He has definitely been benchable for some other pivot options. If you have Bo Nix, I'm sure that you've definitely considered starting him. I think this is a Patrick Mahomes week. I think he continues this momentum, and I think he tries to put a flag in the ground and says, I deserve to win the MVP this year. And I think the campaign reemerges on Black Friday.
That'd be so absurd if he won the MVP. People would be pissed. He has not been the best player through 12 weeks. Not even close.
Nick and I agree on something, but we always get into this loop.
Well, okay.
What does the award mean? Does
valuable
it mean the best player on the year?
You're right. Valuable. Who's the most valuable player in the league? It is Patrick Mahomes every single year, just like LeBron James every single year is the most valuable player. But here's the thing, though. LeBron has gotten robbed of MVPs where his stats were better than Curry, Durant. Like, his stats actually have been better.
Derrick Rose is the iconic one.
Yeah. Derrick Rose. But the thing is, Mahomes' stats aren't better this year than a Josh Allen or even Burrow shouldn't get MVP votes, but Burrow's stats are off the freaking charts. If three of those games, so are Baker's. I've said that Baker should get MVP votes. I've said that. If the Bucs and the Bengals, and they both lost a bunch of one-score games. I think the Bengals lead the league in one-score losses. If three of those losses for the Bengals were flipped, Burrow's getting MVP votes, and it might be the front runner.
I think the Jets lead the league in one possession losses, but
I don't think so. I think it's the Bengals. Maybe you got to take those Jets glasses off. But anyway, my doorbuster is Brock Bowers, and you're probably playing him no matter what, but I'm still going to talk about him. He's your tight end 1 coming off his second lowest game of the season at 7.1. He has 6 out of his 11 games over 15 fantasy points. Facing the Chiefs defenses, who's allowed the 4th most fantasy points to tight ends, an average of 12 points per game. He had 10.8 week 8 against the Chiefs. Here's a little risk here. Gardner Minshew is out for the season. I know that Minshew's nothing special, but I don't think we know who's starting at quarterback. It could be AOC. It could be Desmond Ridder. I don't know if we know who's starting it. I'm not sure if
it sounds like it's going to be Ridder, which is definitely a big problem.
Correct. So here you go. Here's your doorbuster and Brock Bowers. He's so talented you can't bench him, but we'll see exactly where that goes. So lastly, last take of the show. We have your impulse buy, the boom or bust wild card. This player you aren't quite sure about but can't resist starting. They might provide an unexpected payoff or leave you shaking your head wondering why you trusted them. Who do you have?
I think, again, I have a guy that fit this perfectly. As soon as I saw the prompt for it, I thought of one player in this game, and it is Noah Gray, the backup tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, who has had a lot more timeshare than any of us realize. He has over 50% snap share in every single game this year. Over the last 2 weeks, he has been great. He has scored 18.3 and 22.6. Kelsey in those 2 games scored 2.8 and 12.2. So he has absolutely crushed him in terms of fantasy points in that span. We can't forget that he got the bag at the start of the year. He is the boom or bust wild card that an impulse buy would be. The temptation to start him after 2 big games for any tight end like that. We did it with Likely when it was the Andrews situation. Why would we not consider it to be Noah Gray? I could literally see the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other saying, start him, don't start him, start him, don't start him. That's literally how I feel about Noah Gray. And I am here to tell you, I would not make the impulse buy. I do think you should buy him for your dynasty leagues, for your keeper leagues. I think he might be worth the stash. I want to see one more of these games before I would start him, because we saw how Likely panned out for fantasy after Mark Andrews really turned it up the last bunch of weeks, actually. Mark Andrews is in the top 10 now. I don't think Noah Gray gets there this year. I think he can get there next year, but I think now is a good time to buy him as a deep sleeper on your waiver wire.
I'm going to go with Giacobbe Myers. He has 15 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games, including last week against Denver, which was a tough matchup. He had 22 points. He also had 17.2 in week 8 against Kansas City. The over-under is low, set at 42.5. And no Minshew was quarterback, as I just stated. So normally I'd say this is a pretty good play, but I don't know about the Ridder situation. So this is your impulse. You're going to have to decide on Thursday if you do want to impulse him or not. And I don't really have great advice to you. It depends on your roster. This is why we like to answer your roster questions on the Sunday morning live shows at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. But if you have any questions regarding Giacobbe Myers or any of these players, hit us up on Twitter, Primetime FF Pod, or Instagram, Primetime Fantasy Football Podcast. Until then, that's your show for today, guys. A little bit of a shorter one, but that's okay. Hopefully you enjoy your Thanksgiving and have a great time with whoever you're spending your Thanksgiving with. You'll hear from us on Sunday, 8:30 a.m., YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for our Sunday morning live show for week 13. Hopefully by the time we talk then, we're both up in our matchups and you guys are up in your matchups as well. If you enjoyed the show and you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live, and drop a like on this video or any video that you watch from us in the future. Already talked about social media. Lastly, if you want to consume our content in an audio streaming platform, we're available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Anchor if you'd like to listen to the podcast version of the show. Thank you guys for supporting. Again, happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you guys on Sunday.